While they're picking up the offering, I'll bring the morning humor and let you have the morning humor. Now, understand. Sometimes I need to. These are just for fun, right? I'm not saying anything specific. I found a story about a lady that took a trip to Vegas. Okay, and I'm not saying that you should take a trip to Vegas. I'm saying she did. And it may not be a good idea because she was there. She lost almost all of her money. She just lost all kinds of money, and she was down to just the last $50 she had in her pocket, and that was it. And she was, I can't believe I'm so unlucky. I don't know what to do. And somebody overheard this, and he thought he'd give her some advice. He says, well, you know what? A lot of people have luck betting their age at the roulette table. And so she went running right over there, and he walked on, went off his way. A few minutes later, he hears all this commotion and all this running, and people were gathering back. And so he went running back. He wondered if the lady really hit something big. And he gets through the crowd. Well, here's the lady, but she's on the floor, and security's all around her. And the guy, the headmaster there at the table, the guy around the table, he was down, had her hand in his, and he was rubbing her hand, and they were saying, back up, give her air. And he's like, well, what happened? And the guy says, well, I don't know. All that I know is she put all of her chips on 29. When it came up 47, she fainted. I'm thinking gambling and lying are both bad. Okay, that's the moral. All right. That's right. All right, we're in James chapter 2. If you'd open there, if you want to read along, we're picking it up in verse 14. We're going through this study through the book of James, and we've been talking about that James wants us to put our faith into action. That as Christians, as believers, as those that follow God, want to model our lives after Jesus Christ. We want to look more and more like Him every day. And so James has just a ton of practical application and practical information for us on how we can do that. And so in James chapter 2, we're going to pick up our reading there in the next piece of instruction in verse 14. We'll look at it right away this morning. It says, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warm and filled,' without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." Okay, we're going to take a quick break right there. We'll read the rest of the chapter in just a minute. But James asks that question, what good is it? I like the way it says it in the King James. It says, what does it profit you? If you say you have faith, but you do not put that faith into action, if you do not have works to back it up, what does it profit you? What good is it? What do you get out of it? What does anybody else get out of it if we don't move into action? And he goes on to say, your faith, if your faith does not have works, and this phrase just really kind of been wrestling with this all week. Faith does not have works. Can that faith save you? That's an interesting question and even a dilemma. It seems like we even have a problem, especially since Paul writes in Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, "For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is a gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one can boast." So Paul says you're saved by faith and not by your works, but here James comes along and says, if you don't have works, can you be saved by that kind of faith? Paul asks that question, and they seem to be kind of competing. They seem to be questions that are at opposite ends. And so we ask the question, do these two verses contradict one another? Or do Paul and James somehow agree? Well, of course they do. Of course they do not contradict each other. And so we need to hold these two ideas in attention. Attention that says we are saved by faith, but if we are saved, we will live by our works. We will move into action. We will let God take control of our lives and live for Him. Another way to look at this would be that we need to synchronize what God is doing on the inside of us through expressions of that faith on the outside of us. On one hand, God is doing a work within us. He's bringing faith, He's bringing hope, peace, love, and joy all into our hearts, and all that He can do to set us free from our sin, our discouragements, our guilt. I was thinking this morning, I'm going to come off the notes for a moment. We were singing Good, Good Father this morning. I told you before, that's my cry song. And just to be reminded of how good He is, how He loves us and is with us. But the second half of the chorus said, and I'm loved by Him. And I thought, maybe this morning, somebody in the room needed to be reminded that God loves you. And He's proud of you. He's created you to be exactly who you are. And whatever struggles you've had in your life, whatever failures you've had in your life, anywhere you've been knocked down, and anytime the world has told you you're not good enough, the voice of God says something very different. And He loves you. Oh, it's just glorious to think of what He does inside of us. The wonder of that. And so on the other hand, because He's doing something within us, God is doing this incredible work within our lives, within who we are. Then He says, now demonstrate what I'm doing on the inside to the outside. Show that kindness. Serve one another. Learn self-control and so on. God says, let that be expressed in the world around you. Your life is the testimony of your faith. And how you live becomes an expression of what you believe. So then James asked the question, if the way you live is expressing what you believe, then what does your lifestyle say about what you believe? What is your life saying about what's going on and what God is doing within you? Even ask that question, can that faith save him? Is there a kind of faith that is so weak, that is so tepid, that is just lip service, that is just hopefulness, that isn't actually salvation? I was thinking, 33 years ago, I stood on this very stage. Well, not this very stage, because we built the stage at one point, but a stage much like this stage. A very beautiful lady at my side said, "I do," and we've been trying to figure out what that means ever since. But we made certain vows to one another that we'd be married for the rest of our lives. Now suppose after that wedding I walked off the stage and took off and went and hung out with the boys and spent the rest of my life, doing whatever I wanted to and flirting with all the other girls and spending money on everything that I wanted without any kind of concern towards family needs, or I didn't really care or do anything about chores that needed to get done. Technically, legally, I could maybe point to the fact that I was married. But there certainly be good reason to ask the question, am I really married? And it's an important question to think about. Even which one is more important? The paper that we signed, or the relationship and the life that we're building together? You see, you can have a measure of faith, but God is looking for a relationship and a life that you build together. Singer-songwriter Rich Mullins once said, "Never forget what Jesus did for you. Never take lightly what it cost him. And never assume that if it cost him his very life, that it won't also cost you yours." We're saved by faith and faith alone. But if we are saved, then our works of faith become the evidence of that salvation. It becomes the example of what we believe. Because we are saved by faith, we will do works of faith as well. Verse 17 says that faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. And it's easy for people to say they're a Christian, to maybe have a dusty Bible on a shelf somewhere, to come to church once in a while. But the evidence of the lack of change and transformation and works in their life says something about what they really believe. Now let's finish the chapter in James, pick it back up at verse 18, and then learn a couple things about what works look like. Verse 18 says, and James gives a couple of examples here, so watch for these examples. But someone will say, if you have faith and I have works, show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. Kind of what I just said. I will show you the faith I have. I'll demonstrate what I believe based upon how I live my life and the works that I do. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham, our father, justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see, that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scriptures was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. You see, that person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And in the same way, was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. I've always kind of had the opinion that when the Bible tends to summarize a lot of things, kind of gives you bullet points, it kind of says things rather quickly. There's a lot of information. When it says something 2 or 3 or more times, you should probably pay attention. Didn't he say a couple things? He said something twice in this chapter. Faith without works is dead. So let's ask what do works look like, or how should we consider, what can we learn about works? I want to say first of all that works must respond. Abraham responded to the call of God that tested his faith. Rahab, who was a prostitute, interesting that a prostitute is a hero in the Bible because of her faith. Because of not only her faith, but her actions in faith. And she responded to the needs of these messengers. In this story about Rahab, a couple of spies, Jewish spies, have been sent into Jericho to kind of get the lay of the land, figure out what's going on, bring back some information and some intelligence, if you will. And the government knows they know that the Jews are coming their way. They know that they're moving across the land and start trying to move into the promised land. They've even heard stories of how God has been with them and the miraculous things God has done. God saved them from other armies. God dried up the Red Sea and they walked through it. They know these stories and so they're kind of trembling because they know they're coming to take their land. And so when they get word that a couple of spies have entered the city, they're trying to find them. They're frantically trying to find these spies and cut off that flow of intelligence. Rahab, for whatever reason, they knock on her door, and she hides them in her house. And then she goes back and lies to the king's soldiers and says, oh, no, they're not here. They've run out of the city. Chase after them, give chase, and she sends them away. Yeah. What was interesting is there was a sudden need, and she thought, I need to make a decision here. I live in this city, and these are my people, and the authority, the soldiers are questioning me, but I see that there's a people that believe in this God. And I see that this God is real. I see this God is at work. I see the miraculous things this God is doing. Who am I going to align myself? And she chooses to align herself with God in that moment. She believed in the power that God had, and she believed that He had the power to save her life more than her people or her situation. And she aligned herself with him, and she responded. Whatever call God might put on your life, it is best to respond and respond immediately. It's like James said in the last chapter. We can be hearers of the word, but it's only when we become doers. And we put that faith into action. And we allow God to lead our life as he's showing us and directing us and calling us, that we begin to live out his will. And we need to learn how to respond immediately. Do you know, do you realize, have you ever seen, maybe in fact, you could probably look down the row, because I'm going to talk about your neighbor right now and not you. That God sometimes whispers in our ear. God sometimes calls to us. God sometimes speaks to us. But sometimes we ignore what he's saying. Yeah, he'll maybe get your attention later on. Is God calling you to maybe more prayer? Is God calling you to maybe more time in Scripture? Is God saying something in the Scripture that you've kind of been avoiding lately? Is God calling you to be more humble or to deal with an attitude in your life? Is God calling you to serve in some area, some ministry, something, some place to get moving and put into action, to give to somebody else what God has given to you? Is God calling you to help some person in need who's crossed your path? We never know when that's going to happen. Maybe this last week you missed an opportunity, but another one's coming this next week. When you see a need, will you take the time? Is God calling you to bend your knee and give your life to him, but you've been holding back? Today is the day of salvation. And whatever God is saying to you, whatever God is saying to do, respond immediately and listen to his leading in your life. Second of all, can I say that works must be bold? I think sometimes we like to live a safe faith. We like to live a faith that's easy. But in James's examples, he gave some bold examples. He talked about Abraham offering his son up on the altar. So think about that. He offered his son up on the altar. And of course we know that story of how he did that. And it's easy to look on this side of history that God set him free, set the son free, and provided a ram instead. But it means that Abraham and his son packed up their gear. They walked across the wilderness. They climbed the mountain together. They built the altar. Abraham actually bound his son and laid him on the altar before God. I mean, he went all the way. He went clear to the end before God said, okay, your faith has been tested. Your son can be set free. It was a bold statement. It was a strong statement. Have you ever trusted God in a way that was beyond your own ability to trust him? To reach out in a step, to take an action, to do something that was more than you. Which brings me to a little card, a little flyer, we will, a little paper inside your bulletins. Now, after coming back from my sabbatical, I told you my story about my neighbor across the street. And I was challenged to have a faith conversation with him. And I accepted the challenge. And I told you how that turned out. I did have that conversation with him. And I don't remember if I said here, interestingly enough, after that conversation, 2 days later, his wife was rushed to the hospital with a kidney stone. And so right before they left, I just asked, and I felt bad. She's in pain. She's crying. She wants help, right? She wants relief. Although I also knew she's going to get to the ER and she's just going to sit there for a while anyway. So we could take a minute before they leave. And ask, can I pray with you before you go? And so she welcomed the prayer, and we did. So it's just kind of amazing that it was right there, that door, that window of opportunity, and just the proximity of my stepping out in faith, and then having a need arise, and I was already invested. And I knew them, but now I'm spiritually invested in their lives. So I want to challenge you to walk across the street. I said I took the challenge and I made it, and that gives me the right to challenge you to do the same thing. It's up to you, but the challenge is, and it doesn't have to be somebody across the street. I mean, it might be a neighbor on the other side. It might be a family member, coworker. Is there somebody that comes to mind? Is there somebody on your heart that you would take a new challenge? Or some of you maybe you've been kind of priming the pump. You've been building that relationship. You've been nice. You've been kind. You've been trying to help them out. You've been trying to kind of pave the way. And it's ready to ratchet it up a step. It's ready to be bold. It's ready to try something extra. It's ready to say something about faith and ask them or invite them into a conversation about Jesus Christ. Would you take that challenge? And if you will, there's just 3 things to do. Write the name of that person. Then write somebody who you'll be accountable to. Do you have a prayer partner? Do you have a spouse? Somebody you're sitting next to today? Who's in your life that's a kind of a spiritual accountability partner? And tell them that within the next 3 weeks, you will have a spiritual conversation with so-and-so. And I can't be everybody's accountability partner, right? So you got to take, this is on you. I'm not going to be calling you all and finding out how you did. It's up to you. But tell your partner that you want them to call you in 3 weeks and ask how it went. And then the due date of that. So figure out three weeks from today. I could have looked, but I didn't. The last thought, works. We need to respond when God's speaking or opportunity arises. Works must be bold, and works must be sacrificial. Abraham offered his son. Rahab risked her life. Can you imagine the punishment that could have been invested upon her for lying to the prisoners about these spies that she was hiding? She risked her life. These were not easy works. You know, it's really easy to give ourselves a pat on the back just because we came to church or went to a Bible study. What about the sacrificial move of letting God really have your life? Say, God, I'm ready to do the work in my heart that you need to do. I'm ready to invest myself in time spent with you. I'm ready for you to use my life in whatever way you have it in store. So I want to give you another challenge. Our council is talking a lot about this right now. And we've been doing a lot of kind of efforts, if you will, event-type efforts of letting our community know that we're here. We want to ratchet that up, and we want to find new ways to invest in the community and new ways to reach into people's lives. And we want to find new ways to build bridges into our neighborhoods and make sure that our neighbors are glad the Fellowship Church is here. They need to be glad that we're here. They need to know that we're here and what we're about. And they need to be glad that we're here because we care about them and we're ready to help. And we want to figure out ways to kind of ratchet up that sense of serving our community. We're reading a book. It's called The Church of Irresistible Influence. And in the last chapter of the book, he started talking about that in the 18th and 19th century, the church was highly invested in the community. Its major focus was serving the poor and the hungry and helping and making a difference in the community. You think back, every hospital in our city was built because of the Christians. Sonny is, you guys know Sonny, he's one of our ushers, and he's doing a a barbecue this afternoon for people that have retired from Deaconess Hospital, and he invited me to go because I didn't retire from there, but several years ago I worked there in the kitchen. I worked in housekeeping. And the history of that hospital, although it's a private hospital now, it's been privately purchased and it's operated privately. But in the Presbyterian Church, if you are like a leader in the church, they have a deacon and elder system. So if you're a deacon, your wife or your spouse is called a deaconess. And Deaconess Hospital was born because the deaconesses wanted to provide medical care to people that needed it in the community. The schools in our country that were established and built because of Christians, orphanages, daycares, food banks, clothing banks. I mean, go on and on and on. Imagine what our country would look like without the church. And it was extremely popular. It was what the church did. Can you imagine the Great Depression without the church? I mean, who was organizing the soup lines? But somewhere after the World War I, so early part of the 19th century, 20th century, because the early 1900s, something changed, and nobody can really pinpoint an exact thing, except the mentality of the church began to change. And the message was, come to church, come to Jesus Christ, and He'll make your life happy. He'll make you blessed. You're forgiven, so there's a gospel message. But join the church. Be around people that love you and are like you. You can find safety from this awful world that's all around. And the church clearly turned inward upon itself and began to exist to take care of each other. And that message has been perpetuating for nearly 100 years, that what matters is what we look like in here. I believe God's calling us to be sacrificial again. So on the 18th, that date right, Barb? Any idea? If that's not the right date or you don't know? Wednesday, so 15th is next Sunday, right? And I don't think it's in there. No, the 18th, on Wednesday, the 18th. We are putting together a couple of service projects in our community. We're going to meet here a little bit before 6. At 6 o'clock, we're going to load up some cars and we're going to go out to our sites and we're just going to serve our community. We're just going to practice, and I have no idea that we're doing the right thing or what we're going to end up doing. We just know we want to do something. Okay? We're just getting started. So we're going to load up, and you're all invited. Kids can come, teenagers, families, anybody can help. I mean, the smaller ones will be doing some littler things, but this could be for anybody. And we're going to come together and go out and serve in a couple of sites around our community. We're planning on meeting at 6, getting there shortly thereafter, working for around an hour, and then we thought we would, anybody that wants to meet up for maybe a dinner or a little snack or something and tell stories and celebrate at the end can do that as well. Okay, so we'll meet here right before 6. So next Sunday there'll be more details, but next Sunday we'll have that. But so we're asking you, would you give up one night out of your week? Would you sacrifice one night out of your week to serve? Now, maybe you're already doing that others. That's fine. I'm not saying you have to do this, but you do need to do something. And so serve somewhere. Here's an opportunity. And if you'd like to join in, then come along and we'll just go out and serve. It'll be kind of a cleanup thing in some people's houses that need it. Okay, so more information to come next week. So I want to close with just kind of a close your eyes moment. You don't have to, but it's just kind of a wondering. What would it look like if we were a church that served our community in such a way that everything that we did in here, they understood it the same way out there? What if we synchronized the vision that we have as a church to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ and to bless and help and encourage and build up our community with that message? What would it look like if we synchronized the message that we have in here with what people think about us outside? Would we be different in any way? What would it look like if we were people who are willing to be bold for Jesus Christ? If we were open and ready that as we go throughout our day, throughout whatever work we do, whatever activity we do, whatever conversation we do, we are bold and ready to say, God, just take me into a situation and help me find the courage, find the strength, find the boldness to bring you into that situation. What would it look like if we were a church full of people ready to be bold for Jesus that way? And what would it look like if we were a church full of people ready to respond to the calling that God puts on our lives?